of MyPack, GLOPACK and YPACK. So we have 3 speakers today. My name is Arne Fischer. I will be moderating this session. And during the session, the speakers will present some of their work. During this talks, you can already put in some questions in the chat. But what I would ask you to do is that you ask questions for clarification after each speaker. And after the 3 speakers, we have sufficient time to go a bit deeper into the discussion questions. And I think the more in-depth questions would be better served there. But after each speaker, there's a little bit of time for questions for clarifications. If you have a question, you can put them in the chat whenever you like. Or if you want to respond more spontaneously, raise your hand. And if we can see it, we can keep track of that. With that, I think the general introduction is done. And I would like to introduce Giulia Granato, who will be talking about the work she's been doing in our project MyPack, where she's looked at how different consumer segments respond to all different kinds of packaging and packaging system. So Giulia, please share your screen and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, do you see my presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so welcome, thanks for inviting me for this webinar. Indeed, I'm Giulia from Wageningen University in the project MyPack. So my talk today has the title, Who are the Green Consumers? So I will present you some of the information and data that we have collected last year in 2019 within this market segmentation approach study. Indeed, to understand why are the consumers in Europe more interested into sustainable packaging, with the aim to better target MyPack packaging technologies developed in the project. So first of all, just to introduce myself, I'm from Wageningen University in the Netherlands, from the Department of Marketing and Consumer Behavior. In our university in Wageningen, we have a focus on food and sustainability. So for this reason, we are also a great fit in the project MyPack. So indeed, what I will tell you during this 20 minutes, half an hour talk, so I will try to depict you who are indeed these consumers more interested into sustainable packaging. And especially I will tell you really in specifics which age this consumer have, which lifestyle, which values, which education, which households. So I will try to describe them in terms of all the demographic characteristics, but also psychographic characteristics, to better have an idea indeed of who we are talking when we think about consumers, green consumers. But also, I will also tell you which benefits these consumers are more willing to sacrifice for higher sustainability, because you know that in real life, a lot of time you have to make a trade-off. So maybe for higher sustainability, you have to sacrifice another benefit. For example, the packaging is less transparent, so less attractiveness, so a minor attractiveness. And also we'll tell you how much these consumers are willing to spend for sustainable alternatives, and also which are their preferences. So indeed, these data come from a large survey that we launched last year in 5 different European countries. So in Italy, in Greece, in France, Germany, and in the Netherlands. And in total, we have collected 5,035 consumers. We made a choice experiment. So it's an experiment, is like a sort of survey where consumers have to choose to make it indeed realistic. So in real life, consumers have to choose, so they have to trade off different benefits for their choice. And in this case, we set this experiment in a way that consumers have to choose or one or the other packaging. So they had a pair of packaging, so 2 packaging, one on the left and one on the right. And indeed, each of these packaging represent a different trade-off in benefits. For example, one packaging has a higher sustainability, but maybe has a is low in convenience, or is low in preservation, or in attractiveness. And the other packaging on the right or on the left is exactly the opposite. So in this way, you can really see which one they choose and how they trade off the benefits of the packaging. And then we analyze the data with a market segmentation approach that is called latent class analysis. So indeed, now I want to just tell you how these consumers saw the packaging in front of them in the screen. So for example, indeed, we have developed packaging, different variation of packaging for 3 product categories that are also the one of the MyPack project. So there are biscuits, like these cookies you see, salad, and baby food. And you see that these packages were created for graphic designers and presented in visuals. And indeed, this is a classical set of choice experiment where we have a pair of packaging, and then we had a description. For example, there was indicated the material, the format, the size, and the color. And these design manipulation were represented the different benefits that consumer had to trade off. For example, the material was sustainability, the format stands for preservation, the size were the convenience, and the color was for attraction. So transparent or opaque, for example, plastic or biodegradable and compostable, or paper. So sustainability was manipulated or with biodegradable and compostable, or with paper. The format was non-reclosable or reclosable. And then the size was, for example, entire packaging or monoportion, to manipulate convenience in that case. And then we did the same, indeed, as I told you. So, for example, plastic versus paper to manipulate sustainability. And also we did the same for baby food and salad. They were our 3 product categories. So indeed, consumers had to choose one packaging or the other, and then they had to rate their perception. So to what extent they consider the package sustainable, as convenient, good for preservation, and attractive. And then also we measure different variables, such as how much they're willing to spend, for example, for one or the other. And we also measure different psychographic characteristics, such as their lifestyle, their values, where they do groceries, how usually they do shopping, etc. And also different demographic characteristics, such as their household, their age, their gender, education, etc. So first of all, I will give you some general information, and then I will zoom into this market segmentation analysis. So first, we have indication of how much consumers are willing to spend in Europe for sustainable packaging. And when I say sustainable, I'm referring to or biodegradable and compostable. So in this case, the graph refers to biodegradable and compostable packaging, or paper, because paper and biodegradable and compostable material were the 2 ways of manipulating sustainability in this study. So for here, we already know that around 80% of consumers is willing to spend between 0 and 10% more for sustainable alternative. And also we know which consumers, especially in which country, consumers are more willing to spend a bit more. And in this case, we found that Italian consumers are the ones that are willing to spend a bit more for biodegradable and compostable packaging, followed by German consumers. Then we also know, for example, how important is the packaging for the product. And I remind you that indeed we have 3 product categories. So in general, packaging is perceived as more important for salad than baby food and less for biscuits. And that makes sense indeed, because if you think about salad as a fresh product, so probably consumers really think that the package is really essential for a fresh product, and maybe less for a dry product like biscuits. And then also we know across countries where the packaging was considered more important, so which value the consumer give to the packaging. And for example, here we see that the Greek consumer consider the packaging really important for food choices. Then we also know which benefits are more decisive in general for food choices. And here you see that we have the 4 benefits of convenience, preservation, attraction, and sustainability. And here you see that preservation is the benefit consumers consider more decisive when they choose a packaging for the packaging combination. Later, convenience, and then sustainability. And the least, attraction. Even if I also want to remark that attraction matters more when consumers have the package in front of them. So when in general you ask consumers which benefits are more decisive, they in this case reply preservation and less attraction. But then when instead consumers had in front of them the packaging, so the graphics, the design, attraction in that case play a big role. So indeed, as I told you, in this experiment, we created pairs of packaging where the consumer had to choose the right or the left, the one that they are more intended to buy. And these pairs represent different ways of trade off these benefits. So for example, in pair 1, consumers had to sacrifice attraction for higher sustainability. Or in pair 2, they had to sacrifice convenience for higher sustainability. In pair 3, they had to sacrifice preservation only for higher sustainability. In pair 4, they had to sacrifice 3 benefits. They had to sacrifice preservation, convenience, and attraction. And you see that in this pair, the consumer intention to buy for sustainable alternatives is less than in the other pairs. Because in this case, if consumers want to choose a sustainable alternative, they also have to sacrifice in the same way, in the same time, preservation, convenience, and attraction. And then you see that here are more reluctant. In pair 5, for example, they have to sacrifice convenience and attraction. In pair 6, they have to sacrifice preservation and convenience. And in pair 7, preservation and attraction. So this is to have a realistic choice experiment. And also these pairs were created in a particular design that makes sure that you cover all the trade-offs possible. But in general, from this graph, you can also see that consumers are intend to buy the sustainable alternative over the non-sustainable across all the pairs, more or less. Of course, more in some cases where for higher sustainability, they have to sacrifice only one benefit, and depends which benefit they have to sacrifice. And this, for example, was for the baby food, so was for the packaging with the baby food. Then we also have the same for the biscuits and also for the salad. But when you convey sustainability, not anymore with a biodegradable and compostable material, but with paper, because I told you that sustainability was conveyed in 2 ways. So you have plastic versus biodegradable and compostable material, or plastic versus paper. Here you see that consumers are more willing to choose the sustainable alternative when sustainability is conveyed with biodegradable and compostable material rather than paper. So the blue line is biodegradable and the orange line is paper. So indeed, intention to buy for a sustainable alternative is higher when sustainability is conveyed by bioplastic rather than paper. And this phenomenon is also the same for baby food and salad, and even more pronounced. So in some cases, consumer has a negative intention to buy, so they do not want to choose the sustainable alternative, but they choose the non-sustainable alternative when sustainability is conveyed by paper. And especially in the case of baby food and salad. As you see, sometimes these red columns are negative. And that makes sense because maybe when sustainability is conveyed by paper, consumers have other thoughts and they think that maybe the packaging is not good for preservation of the product, for example. So they prefer in that case to choose the non-sustainable, so the plastic alternative. And this phenomenon is instead less pronounced in the case of biscuits, where instead the consumer intention to buy for a paper is still high. Okay, now we'll zoom into the market segmentation analysis. So who are indeed these consumers more interested into sustainable packaging? So as I told you, we perform a market segmentation analysis, Latin class, and we identify different segments of consumers. So in this case, you can slice the market in slices, indeed, in segments, to see which benefits they consider more important in their choice. And for example, we have identified 5 segments. So one segment of consumer that is more interested in preservation, so care more about preservation and base their food packaging choices on preservation. Then another segment is instead made of consumer more interested in sustainability, so value sustainability higher than the other benefits. And this, for example, segment 2, but also segment 3. Because you see these values are the values of regression analysis. Now I will not go into details into this statistical analysis, but just to show these values are higher. So it means that this consumer value these benefits, less the others. In segment 4, for example, we have consumer that we maybe can call indifferent because you see the values are not so pronounced in all of these benefits. Maybe we can say that these consumers are a bit more interested into attraction, so value more their aesthetic appeal of the packaging. And then we have a 5th segment where consumers are really worried about the convenience of the packaging, so how convenient the packaging is. So if you see if the percentage indeed of these segments, you see that a big slice of the market is made of these consumers that are interested in sustainable alternatives, because in total these 2 segments represent 47.5% of the total market. So I would say a big part, so a promising market. And then indeed we have to zoom into who are these consumers. So can we describe this 47.5% of the market? And indeed we can, if we take into account all of these demographic and psychographic characteristics. So first of all, we can say that between the people that highly value sustainability, so segment 2 and 3, we have more consumer of biscuits. So remember that we have this product category. So in the biscuits survey had more consumers in segment 2 and 3. Then we want to see which age and gender they have. And here, actually, the demographic characteristics do not help so much in describing the segments, but we can see that in general, we found that the more green consumers are in general more female and also with a middle age. Then indeed, in which countries they are. So mostly they are Italian and German consumers, the ones that are more into sustainable packaging. So you see that Germany and Italy are more in the segment 2, that is the sustainability-oriented consumers. And then, for example, another evidence is that in segment 5, so the convenience-oriented are more Dutch consumers. Then we also know which type of education they have. For example, they're more sustainable-oriented consumers have more high education. They also have a smaller household composed mainly by 2 people. And instead, convenient-oriented consumers are mostly the ones that work full-time. And makes sense because maybe indeed these consumers are the ones that have less time to spare, to prepare, and to do shopping. So they're more convenience-oriented. Then we also know the sustainable-oriented consumer regarding packaging are also the ones that value sustainability in general in their food choice, in general. And indeed, they value sustainability as the most decisive benefit in their food choices. Then we also we took into account values that are called Schwarz values, so different values that are considered as life guiding principles in a human's life. And these values indeed help to understand better this sustainable-oriented consumer, and we can say that sustainable-oriented consumers tend to value more the value of universalism and benevolence as more important compared to other clusters, and also they have a need for stimulation, so they want to be stimulated and have different stimuli. And these were the only three values that were significantly different compared to all the others. So the one that we can say they are good predictors of consumer cluster. The other are less, much less. Moreover, in terms of lifestyle, again, we can say that lifestyle characteristic has to be taken into account carefully because not always are good predictors to target these consumers, but we can say, for sure, we can say that sustainability-oriented consumers are the ones that tend to search more for information in the packaging and in general when they do grocery. So they want to know what the product contains. They take time to compare the labels to make the best choice or to decide for which brand they want to choose. And again, also in the same idea, sustainable consumer also the one that pay more attention on the verbal cues of the packaging. So indeed they read the information and also all the verbal elements, the labels, and the packaging contain. Why instead the convenience-oriented consumer are more attracted by the visual cues, so images, colors, etc. And these also represent all the information that are really valuable indeed to better target the MyPack technology that were developed during this project. Also, we can say that indeed convenience-oriented consumers are the ones that actually want to spend less for sustainable packaging. And again, indeed, the picture is quite coherent because sustainable-oriented consumers also prefer to spend as least as possible, of course, but a bit more than the others. So 25% of them are willing to spend 10% more for sustainable packaging, so a bit more than the other clusters. So in this case, we can say that indeed not only they are interested into sustainable packaging, but also this interest is reflected into how much they're willing to spend. So in sum, to conclude my talk, who are these green consumers more into sustainable packaging? So we've seen that this cluster is concentrated more into the middle-aged consumers. In terms of country, they're more Italian and German. So these are the market that is more interested nowadays in sustainable packaging, and specifically into the bioplastics, so biodegradable and compostable. They have high education and also are composed of 2 people, so they have a small household. And overall, they represent a promising market because indeed they represent the 47.5% of the total market. They are also driven by values such as universalism and benevolence, and also they have a need for stimulation. There are also those consumers tend to search for information and particularly focus on the verbal cues of the packaging, so they like to spend time on read the information and analyze all the labels and information provided. But also still price sensitive because also they prefer to spend the least as possible, but a bit more. So they're a bit more open to spend a bit more, between 10 and 25% more for sustainable alternative. And then we have analyze also all other characteristics, such as where they do grocery. For example, they buy mainly supermarkets, or they also have found which type of information they search, if they read newspaper, where they find the information, etc. And indeed, in general, this type of analysis, market segmentation analysis, indeed, especially if done with this large sample size, as we did, and across 5 countries, really help to have a better idea of who are these consumers in specifics, and also then to better target the new packaging innovations. yeah, this was indeed to give you an overview, and this is our team. So myself, Professor Hans van Dijpen, Professor Nat Fischer, this is also the main director of this talk. Thank you for listening, and of course, if you have questions, more than welcome.
Thank you, Julia, for this presentation. If people have questions for clarification, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat. And I've already seen a question from Sebastian Gossel with the question, was the information available regarding consumer knowledge about the actual preservation capacity of the proposed packagings in your survey, Julia? Can you answer that?
Yeah. Yeah, so we didn't ask indeed if they have knowledge on preservation, but here we don't ask directly if they consider the packaging good for preservation or not, but because we manipulate the benefit of preservation through the real design elements of the packaging. So as I show you in the picture at the beginning with the pair of the packaging, we had, for example, material. So the description of the packaging was material, plastic or biodegradable, and that was for sustainability. Then we have format, so non-reclosable or reclosable, and that was for preservation. So indeed, to control for differences in consumers into their knowledge of preservation or convenience or etc., we manipulate specifically the design elements of the packaging, such as indeed reclosable or non-reclosable. And then we see if they are willing to sacrifice the reclosability, in that case of the packaging, for higher sustainability, for example.
Does that answer your question, Sebastian?
Yes, that's okay for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then there's a next question from Valerio Palumbo, who asks, was sustainability explained at the start of the questionnaire? And when looking at sustainability, did you only consider environmental sustainability or also other dimensions of sustainability?
Yeah. So in this case, in this survey, specifically sustainability was conveyed through all biomaterials, so compostable and biodegradable, and at the beginning, indeed, it was explained what it is, to indeed control for difference again in knowledge. So there was an explanation formulated together with the partner of MyPack project that indeed is responsible to create this material, biodegradable and compostable packaging, where there was a definition and explanation of this material, and the second way of manipulating sustainability in this case was through paper. So these were the only two elements that we manipulate to convey sustainability in this survey.
So mainly environmental sustainability, not...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Then a question from Valérie Guillard. What is the consumer's perception of what is sustainability? And are you sure that the researchers and experts and consumers have the same definition of a sustainable packaging? I'm not sure that's completely a question for clarification, but if you can give a short answer. Perhaps
yeah, so we already know that indeed consumers and experts misalign in terms of perception of sustainability. And in this, so what I can reply at least to what we did here in this survey, we again manipulate sustainability through the design elements, and this is what we provide to consumers. So the description of the packaging below the picture was indeed the material. So for example, the package on the left is plastic, the package on the right is biodegradable and compostable material. If you do not know the definition and the explanation of biodegradable and compostable, they could read it, and then they have to choose. They have to choose in terms of what extent they're willing to buy, the one more on the right or the one more on the left, and was measured through a 7-point scale. So -3, +3, the one on the right or on the left. Yeah, that was basically what we did. And also, yeah, and then for each of these pairs, we also measure perceptions. So to what extent do you consider this packaging sustainable? So more the one on the right or on the left. Again, was a 7-point scale from -3 to +3.
Yeah, but in this study, you didn't explicitly compare expert judgments to consumers. But
No.
I think that that's a relevant question perhaps for the more central discussion. So if there are no urgent questions for clarification, and I see none, then I would suggest to carry on with the next presentation. That's from GLOPACK. Juliette Isler, I hope I pronounced it correctly, will talk about some specific packagings, and I had a preview, and we will get something about different types of packagings, including intelligent packaging. So I'm very curious about hearing about that. Juliette, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Arnold. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Juliette Isler. I'm from France and work for Symmetris, companies specialized in marketing survey. During this webinar, I will present you the main results of studies which were conducted for GLOPACK projects. The GLOPACK project is an European project which aims at facilitating access to innovative food packaging for both company and consumer, enabling the reduction and circular management of food, including packaging and wastes. GLOPACK focuses on three main advances in the food packaging sector. The first one is the bioplastic packaging materials. The second one, an active packaging to improve food preservation and shelf life without additives. And the third one, and the last one, is a new generation of intelligent packaging with RFID technology. So today we will present you the main results of the European consumers' perception and acceptation on this innovative eco-friendly packaging. To understand and analyze the European consumer perception, we privilege two methods. The first one was the focus group with a qualitative approach, and the second one is a quantitative approach with an online survey. We have to say that this work, the work on these two approaches was conducted by Symmetris, Econcept, and CBHU. Concerning the qualitative approach, the two focus groups were organized in 5 countries, so France, Italy, Belgium, Ireland, and Hungary. And in each group, 8 participants were recruited, except in France, where there was 9 participants per group. Concerning the online survey, this survey was sent to 1,000 European people from the 5 different European countries. This European country were the same as for the focus group. Each online questionnaire were sent proportionally by country. So therefore, 2,000 online questionnaires were sent by countries. Regarding European consumer profile, who were asked, we can say that a perfect equity regarding the gender, so male and female, and the age was respected. And we have to notice that in order to analyze the most reliable responses, almost 2/3 of respondents were the person of the household in charge of buying groceries. Regarding food profiles or food habits, we can note that 80% of respondents eat everything compared to less than 20% who said that they try to limit their meat consumption, particularly women. And I think it's important to say that the youngest people are more sensitive to their consumption impacts on the environment than other people. So we can begin this presentation with the concept of sustainable food consumption. And according to the European consumer, this concept can be summed up around three main pillars. As sustainable food consumption is associated for the European consumer, it's associated with local product purchases and therefore less transportation and a decrease of pollution in the air. Sustainable food consumption is also associated with environmental friendly packaging and less food and packaging waste. We can say that for the European consumer, sustainable food consumption is considered as better for the environment and preserve it. The second pillar is the economic performance with the promotion of local products. And the last pillar is the preservation and improvement of safety, health, and well-being, because of a decrease of pesticides, additives, and chemicals. We can also say that according to European people, the sustainable food consumption is also associated to local products, to fresher local products. So this is of a positive impact on health and well-being. We can also note that more and more European people are conscious of the bad impact of their food consumption on the environment, and therefore they aim at consuming better and less, with the main and common objective that is to avoid food and packaging wastes. We can also note in this graph show it us that Hungarian respondents are the least familiar with the sustainable food consumption concept, while Italy seems to be more familiar with inequity male and female. We can note that during the study that more and more European consumers try to put environmentally friendly action into their homes in order to reduce the quantity of food and packaging wastes. This action, in order to reduce food waste, is where that consumers try to regulate their consumption, meat consumption above all. They freeze food to eat it later. They try to eat the leftover, and they put some action to reduce packaging wastes, and therefore they can say that they buy bigger quantities to reduce packaging, though there is less packaging, and then try to not use or to reuse packaging when they do a purchase of food. Another action which can improve consumer impacts on the environment is the consumption of organic products. we can note that Irish, Italian, Belgian, and French consumer buy sometimes or always organic products, while Hungarian people are not used to buy organic products. More than 50% of Hungarian people declare never buying this kind of products. While more than 90% of French people say buying sometimes or always organic product, which puts France as the first European country represented in that survey. We can also note that expected to Hungary, where men are more inclined to buy organic product than women, there is no difference in purchase habits between men and women in the other country. Throughout Europe, the 65 years old and above are not used to buy organic products, and in fact, 25% of them never buy this kind of products. And we can say that young people between 35 years old and 36 and 59 years old people are the ones who buy more organic products compared to the average. Another point, and the last point, is that vegetarian and vegan people buy more organic product than people who eat everything. So European consumer during the survey were asked to rank 7 origin of packaging by order of preference, from 1 as the most preferred to 7 at the least preferred. So we can note that mineral-based packaging and organic waste packaging are perceived as preferred for food. European consumers think that this packaging pollute the least and therefore are better for the environment. We can note that people who prefer wheat straw-based and mineral-based packaging are slightly more represented by women, and moreover, more than 30% of them are 50 years old and above, and they buy organic products. Virgin petrol-based packaging is considered as the worst option for food packaging because of its negative impact upon the environment. However, if we add recyclable petrol-based, we can note that petrol-based packaging convinced 25% of European people. The last element to highlight is that the organic waste manure packaging is one of the least preferred packaging. In fact, this kind of packaging does not convince the European people because of sanitary reasons. In fact, waste manure packaging is associated to bad smell, lack of hygiene. If we look at consumer expectation and preference regarding packaging and of life, we can say that reusability and recyclability are the most important feature for packaging. Ireland puts compost at home in the 3rd place with 35%, and waste disposal is relatively higher in Belgium with 11%. Concerning the perception of bioplastic packaging. So in order to facilitate consumer understanding of sustainable packaging, 2 GLOPACK prototypes were shown during the session. And we can note that a consumer were not familiar with this type of packaging. Hungarian and Irish consumer are the least familiar, while Italy seems to be the most familiar. Men and young people seems to be more familiar than other people. According to European consumer, bioplastic packaging has positive impacts on the environment. For more than 80% of European consumers, especially for France, the fact that these trays are made from agricultural and food waste is a strength compared to fossil-based plastic packaging. And this point is shared by the 50 and 65 years old, while the youngest people disagree with that point. We can also note that European consumer, more than 55%, the European consumer think that the use of sustainable packaging will reduce waste. And this point is particularly shared in Italy compared to the other countries. Therefore, we can note that Belgium disagrees with that point. Gender and age ranges do not have an impact upon this answer. But we can say that people who buy organic products and vegans strongly agree with the fact that the use of sustainable packaging will reduce waste. So let me present you the issues to take into account concerning the bioplastic packaging. For almost 60% of European consumers, they agree to say that sustainable trays will be more expensive. And this point is mainly shared in Hungary and France. Therefore, we can note that, moreover, we can note that this point is shared by the oldest, the 50 years old and above, and by people who never buy organic products. There is a second issue according to European consumer. In fact, the bioplastic end of life could be an issue to manage. European consumer explain us that they have to be reassured and would like to get information and explanation on the condition under which the tray are compostable and recyclable. Regarding the willingness to buy bioplastic packaging, we can note that more than 80% of European consumers are ready to buy sustainable packaging. Only Hungarian people seem to be more skeptic with this kind of packaging, We can note also that all over European, there is no difference between the two prototypes shown, and the color of the tray are not important for the European consumer. Regarding the perception of active packaging, so two elements were presented as possible example for active packaging to illustrate the concept of packaging, active packaging. And we can say that as for sustainable and bioplastic packaging, European consumer are not familiar with this kind of packaging. As for bioplastic food packaging, Hungarian and Irish consumer are the least familiar with this kind of products, this kind of packaging, while Italy seems to be the most familiar. European consumer notice the positive impact of active packaging on the improvement and increase of food end of life. And according to European consumer, the use of active packaging allows to better protect and preserve the food and its freshness. They associated active packaging with a decrease of additive and preservatives in food because they find this solution more natural. As a consequence, active packaging has a positive impact on the environment, according to European consumer, because of less waste and it has also a positive impact on health because of higher safety and a decrease of additive. This point is mainly shared by the 35 and 49 years old, and shared also by people who buy organic products. Regarding the issues to take into account, we notice that even if consumer perceive major strains regarding active packaging, 25% of them remain suspicious and feel a lack of information of this solution. And we can note that more than 80% of European consumers agree with the fact that they need more information about active packaging before using it. This point is particularly shared by Hungarian consumers. And we noticed also that women are the ones who need more information compared to men. And the last point is to say that the 50 years old and above people share this need to have more, to get more information about active packaging before using it. The last point, the last issue to take into account to uptake a market, to uptake active packaging in the market is the high cost. In fact, for more than 60% of consumer, active packaging will be more expensive compared to the other type of packaging. if we ask people concerning their willingness to buy active packaging, and we note that less than 80% of European consumers are ready to buy active packaging, even if they are not familiar with this type of packaging. They declare that they could buy active packaging, but we see just before that they have to get information to be reinsured. We can note also that the younger the consumer, the more the consumer is ready to buy active packaging. And the more a consumer buys organic product, the more is likely to buy active packaging. And the last innovation, so the intelligent packaging. So we will see the perception of European packaging, intelligent packaging. In this session we present to consumer Tageos RFID tags to show them what is intelligent packaging. And as for the active and bioplastic packaging, we can say that this type of packaging is really unknown by end consumer. In a similar way to active packaging, Hungarian consumers are the ones who are the least familiar, contrary to Italian consumer. We can say also that men, mainly the 35 and 49 years old, seems to be more familiar with the intelligent packaging concept than women. And when we ask European consumer about the benefit of intelligent packaging, they say that they think that intelligent packaging will increase the consumer safety by informing if the product is still good or not. We can say that this point is strongly shared by France and Hungary. And we can also highlight that there is no opinion difference between men and women. So there is no difference, no gender difference regarding that point. The other benefits of intelligent packaging, when asked, more than 60% of European consumers declare agreeing with the fact that this type of packaging will bring more transparency with regards to the product's origins and distribution. This point is particularly shared by France, Hungary, and Italy. Women strongly agree with that point. We can also note that the fact to buy or eat organic product seems to have an impact upon the opinion consumer. In fact, the more consumer buy organic product, the more he or she agrees with the fact that intelligent packaging will bring more transparency. But we have to note that there is some issues to take into account regarding intelligent packaging. So more than 80% of European consumers agree with the fact that they need more information about this kind of packaging before using it. This point is underlined by Hungarian and French people. In the same way, the 65 years old and above agree with the need to get more information about intelligent packaging. And therefore, then people who buy organic products and who eat everything are the ones who mainly need information compared to vegan and vegetarian people. Another issue to take into account is that close to 70% of European consumers think that the intelligent packaging will be more expensive. This point is particularly shared in France and Hungary. We can also know that gender and age do not have a real impact upon this point. And in the same way, there is no difference between people who buy organic or not, organic product or not. However, we can note that there are some doubts in the European consumer's mind. And first, consumer perceive intelligent packaging more relevant for retailer and producer than for themselves. And this point is very important to note. They have some difficulty to have a clear opinion with regards to the fact that intelligent packaging will reduce food waste, and so therefore they do not perceive a real positive impact on the environment. If we look at the willingness of European consumer to buy intelligent packaging, we can say that less than 70% of European consumer declare that they could buy intelligent packaging. And as for the active packaging, the younger the consumer, the more the consumer is ready to buy intelligent packaging. To conclude this presentation, there is some main results to remember. So we can note that the gender and family status have little impact on the European consumer perception and acceptation concerning the sustainable food packaging. In fact, whatever the gender and family status, consumer seems to agree with the fact that there is too much packaging. However, we can note that countries, age, and purchasing habits have an impact. So the more the country is economically stable, such as Italy or Belgium, the more consumers are sensitive to sustainable packaging. In the same way, we can note, and we talk about this point several times during the presentation, the younger the consumer is, the younger is likely to buy sustainable packaging. Another point to note is that there is a difference between vegan people and the other. And we can say that all around Europe, consumers are ready to buy bioplastic, but are not really reluctant with active and intelligent packaging, because they really need to have more information and proof about this technology. Thank you for your listening, and if you had a question, I will ask you.
Thank you, Juliette, for this very extensive and comprehensive overview. Unless there are very urgent questions, because we're running a little bit late, I would look at the questions that are in the chat. Some of them are more for the general discussion, I think, and I would like to reserve those for there, because that may be better suited there. So unless there are very urgent questions about comprehending this last presentation, then I would like to carry on with the last presentation by Milika Nadenovic, who I hope I pronounce your name right, Millie, who goes by the name of Millie, who will tell us a little bit more about design elements in this packaging and how consumers respond to this. Millie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm assuming you can hear me, or I am hoping you can hear me.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, and let's see if you can see my screen. Yes,
I can see your screen.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Today, in this last presentation, I will be talking about consumer responses to the many faces of sustainable food packaging. My name is Milica, but I mainly go by Millie for the sake of your pronunciation. And I work at Wageningen University in research, from where I have been a part of YPACK project for almost 2 years now. And it's a project that I'm very excited about, and I hope I can share some of this excitement with you through the findings of 2 projects that we have recently worked on. But before we dive into our findings, I would like to introduce YPACK packaging. As you have seen, both GLOPACK and MyPack have different features that facilitate sustainability, and the same goes with YPACK, except in the case of YPACK, sustainability is facilitated by making the packaging bio-based, which means that we are using renewable sources for production, such as cheese whey or almond shells. Then during the actual consumption stage, the packaging is made more sustainable by using shelf life technology. And this means that the packaging itself employs a particular kind of technology that keeps food fresh for longer, which in turn reduces the spoilage of food by a significant amount. And then finally, the packaging is also compostable, which means that it can be dissolved in the environment once it's done with consuming after a specific time frame has passed. So these are all great news from the technological side of things. However, sustainable solutions in general, not only for packaging, are only sustainable once they're accepted by the consumers, right? So this idea and this thought has motivated the first research project that we worked on, in which we investigated how the consumers react to different elements of sustainability in plastic food packaging. And by different elements, I'm referring to the 3 elements of YPACK that I have just described. So to investigate this, we ran a number of surveys across 7 different countries in Europe. We included people from all walks of life, from Denmark, Hungary, Portugal, Spain, Turkey, Netherlands, France. I hope I'm not missing a country. But more than 7,000 people were included, and through this number of surveys, we've measured general sociodemographics of people, their attitudes, and current behavioral practices. But centrally to this particular research was consumer assessment of different packaging options that were derived by combining sustainable attributes of packaging, also in comparison to conventional packaging, plastic packaging in our case. So to emphasize once more, we compared different types of sustainable plastic packaging with conventional plastic packaging. And once we collected this data, we analyzed it in two distinct steps. Similar to Julia, we were interested in market segmentation. So we first analyzed our data by capturing the unique homogeneous groups within the sample of consumers. And then we used these consumer groups. We wanted to describe these consumer groups to the best of our ability with the other variables pertaining to attitudes, behaviors, and sociodemographics in the sample, right? So the question of, can we observe unique consumer groups within our sample? The answer is yes. We have actually observed 5 distinct consumer groups. And as you can see from the slide, these 3 consumer groups here can be labeled as particularly sustainability favoring ones. One consumer group was in favor of bio-based packaging. That was the most pronounced attribute that they liked. The other was compost favoring, so compostable packaging. And then we also had a group of consumers in which there was a similar degree of liking for both bio-based and compostable packaging. And I would like to say similar high degree of liking of both attributes. Then perhaps more interestingly or surprisingly for some, we also observed a group of tech rejectors, we labeled them, and these consumers were, for them, the most pronounced evaluation of the packaging was a negative one, and a negative one of packaging options that employed shelf life technology. Lastly, our 5th group of consumers was labeled as indifferent because this group of consumers didn't show a clear preference for either sustainable or conventional packaging, and it was all the same to them, it seemed. I should also note that this group was the most populated group in our sample. So by lumping the 3 eco-enthusiastic consumer groups, we get about 50% of our population, which is good news. I should say that for each of the groups, sociodemographics were not a particularly strong predictor of anything. Therefore, though we have noted some effects for education, gender, age, and so on, these were not particularly strong when it came to sufficiently describing each of the consumer groups. However, their attitudes and behavioral frequencies of certain actions were something that we can use better to describe these groups. And as you can see, these 50% of eco-enthusiastic consumers also reported leading more sustainability-oriented lifestyles. And what I mean by that is that they report higher degree of knowledge of sustainability, they engage more in waste reduction practices, they also value naturalness in their products more, and in general rate sustainable packaging option better than conventional ones on a number of different dimensions, including health, taste, quality, and so on, indicating that packaging perception seems to have an impact also on the perception of the actual product, which is an interesting finding in itself. Then we have this biggest group of consumers, which is 39%, approximately 39%. And with these consumers, the most prominent feature of them was lack of sustainability knowledge. They were convincingly least informed about sustainability topics within the sample. And they also reported not engaging in a lot of sustainability encouraging practices, if you will. And then lastly, we have the 11%, which are these tech rejector consumers. And these consumers, not surprisingly, evaluate conventional packaging options more favorably than sustainable packaging options. And this finding may not be particularly surprising, bearing in fact the existing literature out there that points to the fact that consumers, or at least a portion of consumers, tends to show some reluctance when it comes to introducing new technology to products that are consumed, basically technology that is in touch with directly with your food, such as shelf life technology, right, in packaging. So all in all, the findings of this first research project that I wanted to talk about are in general favorable for YPAC and sustainable packaging in general. Consumers show clear liking of bio-based and compostable packaging, which is great. And perhaps a recommendation to get more people on board with sustainable packaging notion would be investing in educating the consumers, maybe educating the consumers two-dimensionally. One, educating them to know that there is a need for more sustainable packaging options entering the mainstream market and their importance for the environmental protection. And then B, also educating them that shelf life technology is a safe and reliable way of introducing sustainability in the food domain, right? Yes, and now this brings me to the second research project that I wanted to talk about. And in this research project, we have investigated which design elements signal packaging sustainability to the consumers. This data was collected during a pandemic, so we had to collect it online to surpass the COVID restrictions. And the data was collected in Spain, Portugal, and Turkey. In this particular project, we investigated how different colors of the packaging, specifically white, brown, and black, and how different claims influence consumer perceptions, their willingness to buy, and of course, waste disposal behavior. I should emphasize here that waste disposal behavior, it was a particularly important outcome measure here, simply because yes, sustainable packaging is great, especially if this sustainable packaging is plastic looking, but should be discarded with organic waste. However, as long as the consumer does not know that the intended waste disposal is with organic waste, we run a great risk of contaminating the already existing plastic recycling streams. So one of the biggest musts of YPAC is to clearly communicate to the consumer that this packaging, although it looks much like plastic packaging, conventional plastic packaging, must be discarded with organic waste. Therefore, we included two different claims on the packaging that varied in vagueness, vague versus more explicit claim. And both of them communicated sustainability of the packaging, but you will see that one of them was way more clear. So we asked a number of other questions in the survey along with perceptions of the consumers. They were presented, each consumer was presented with 6 packaging designs, as I mentioned, varying in color and varying in the verbal claim presented on the packaging. And as you can see here, each packaging had a constant logo that signaled compostability as well. We asked the consumers about their perception of sustainability, ability to keep food fresh, good quality, tastiness, attractiveness, and so on. But for the sake of time, I will not go in depth about this yet. So our results were pretty straightforward when it comes to waste disposal behavior of the consumers. So the second, we included vague claims on our packaging designs. And by vague, I mean eco-friendly packaging, as you can see from the slide. Consumers had a tendency to discard this plastic packaging, sustainable plastic packaging with plastic waste. However, we see a shift once the explicit claim is portrayed on the packaging, where the consumers switch from disposing into plastic waste to organic waste, where we actually want them to do so. Perhaps it's easier to notice this shift from this graph. And here, it's important to look at these yellow and orange lines. And you will see that the dominance of yellow lines, which is plastic waste sorting option, is present for all packaging options with a vague claim. As you can see, both black, brown, and white. However, with brown, we have less of a difference, less of a pronounced yellow line, right? And then the second, we include this exchange, actually, of vague for explicit packaging, we see a shift. So instead of the yellow line being dominant, we see a shift of orange lines becoming more dominant, which is actually organic waste sorting, reporting of the consumers. So explicit claims do facilitate proper waste disposal. That's the main conclusion. However, color of the packaging should also be noted. And I would like to say that we have a finding that brown packaging is actually packaging color that is most recognizable as organic waste, which is good news because it does work as a nudge, but by itself, it does not seem to facilitate proper waste disposal to a degree that would be satisfactory. And then this brings me to the question of, okay, which packaging design of the 6 are the consumers most willing to buy? And our finding is that consumers are most willing to buy black packaging designs with explicit claims. And even though black packaging has not been associated with most eco-friendliness or most sustainability, this packaging option was indeed seen as tastiest, of best quality, and with the best protection, indicating that all of these 3 elements that are 3 of the most important elements for consumer choice based on our results do indeed interplay for biggest or highest willingness to buy such packaging. And this finding can be explained with research in color psychology, indicating that products packaged in black are often implicitly used to communicate premium quality of whatever the product may be. Or alternatively, this finding may be related to familiarity of the consumers, because all 3 of the countries still have minced meat typically packaged and sold in black plastic trays. Yes, so all in all, we can conclude from this research that claim is more important than color when it comes to higher score on environmental friendliness and proper waste disposal. However, color does take over a more important role once we are talking about willingness to buy. And by color, I mean black packaging variants. And I would like to end this presentation by leaving you with 2 main takeaway messages. The first one is that good news, consumers are enthusiastic about most characteristics of sustainable packaging. And by most, I mean bio-based and compostable packaging. However, to increase these numbers of enthusiasts for sustainable packaging, good communication and good education of the consumers seem to play key roles. We have a lot more research and results coming in. Sorry. So please stay in touch, and thank you for your time and your attention. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Millie, for this concise and very beautifully designed presentation. What I would suggest to do is that if there are quick questions for clarifications on Millie's presentation, we can answer them straight away. But after that, I would suggest that we go to the more open discussion, where I would ask the audience to bring questions that are more for discussion across the three presenters. So I also would like to invite the three presenters to open their cameras and mics so we can interact with them. People who ask a question, either raise your hand or type them in the chat. I have a few that I've noted down. And if you want to discuss with the people, it might be nice to open your camera as well, that we see who's talking. So if there are no immediate comments, then I'll take one of the things that was still listed on the chat from a while back. And that was a question on, a question from Sunar NP Biopolymers. That's probably not a real person, but it was about, so what do you think about biodegradable and compostable products future, especially with the upcoming ban on petroleum plastics that may be coming up? So how will these new materials help, in your opinions as experts?
Well, maybe I can start. We explicitly address this, and our findings indicate that most of the consumers have a pretty favorable attitude towards both bio-based and compostable packaging. Even though we identify several groups of consumers within our sample, each group at least did not show a dislike for compostable or bio-based packaging, which in comparison to conventional plastic. So that is good news, because it seems like sustainability is becoming more and more of a salient term for consumers, even when it comes to, let's say, secondary purchases, because packaging indeed is secondary to the purchase of food. So I am hopeful, and our findings support this, I think.
Does either Julia or Juliette wants to respond to that, or?
I think that concerning compostable products future, we know during our study that the feature end of life packaging, waste at home is the most important feature for end of life packaging, only for 24% of European people. But I think that biodegradable and compostable product is in the European consumer mind a good thing compared to petrol-based packaging.
Well, perhaps that also links a little bit to the next discussion from Paco Varela, who turned on his camera. Do you want to raise the point yourself or from the chat?
Well, I have raised my camera. Yes, no, I have commented that we have been studying about sustainability. So in iFood that we have similar consumer tests, and we have been analyzing with families how they see sustainability, and we have been classifying families according the way that sustainability is important for them, not only for packaging, that is for all the type of product that can be made, maybe done with green products or recycled product or reused products, and that was my comment related to it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. But perhaps at a more complex level, we're talking about perception of what is sustainability.
Yes.
And I think that also relates to all three. I think Juliette already raised a little bit about the food waste. I think Julia and Millie also do to some extent to the packaging waste. So what do we see as sustainable in this packaging domain? Only the packaging, only the environment, other dimensions of sustainability, the combined food packaging combination, or, well, what do consumers do? How do consumers look like it in your opinion?
Well, in our research, we kept things constant when it came to the products packaged inside. So we did not account for this congruency or incongruency between sustainable packaging versus non-sustainable product. However, as you have seen, I presented results about minced meat, which inherently isn't necessarily seen as a sustainable product. But because this is work in progress, we still lack data with more sustainable, let's say, products. So in the near future, we are collecting the same type of data with the same type of manipulations of packaging for cucumbers as particularly sustainable, if you will, although water consumption of cucumbers is also questionable. And then we are collecting pasta as neutral product inside. So we will see if we have differences there. But if we do, keep in touch and we will let you know.
I recall that Julia was looking at different products there. So biscuits were seen as less important for packaging. So will that have to do something with the overall sustainability there? In the view of the consumer, of course.
I think in that sense was like the importance that the packaging can have for the product. So indeed, based on the results that I presented, consumers consider the packaging more important for salad and baby food. So the one that we can consider as more fresh product and less for biscuits, even if for biscuit would be really important for transportation as well. But so yeah, of course, I think that also the consideration about sustainability also depends on the combination, packaging and product. Even if I also know from other results that consumers tend to perceive the sustainability of the packaging more in terms of environmental impact of the packaging itself rather than the environmental impact of the food waste.
Yeah, that also almost automatically brings me to the next issue. And there was also a comment in the chat from Benjamin Biesdorf. How about it, willingness to buy, willingness to pay? So I saw all three of you to some extent refer to that. So how would you translate that? Because now I'm doing a bit of an introspection, but the last time I bought a package was when I had to wrap up Sinterklaas gifts a week ago, because then I bought gift paper. And the time before that I bought a package, I cannot recall. So how is that willingness to buy? How is that referring to, and to pay perhaps, to the package or to whatever you're doing? How do you look at that? From a consumer's point of view, of course.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. Actually, I was also curious to know how Millie measure intention to buy. But personally, what we did is that, we ask in a 7-point scale to what extent the consumer willing to buy one or the other. So creating like a realistic setting. And not one by one, because the risk of asking the intention to buy per product packaging combination is that it's not realistic, because consumers do not have to make a choice. And when instead you make a choice, you have to sacrifice one option for the other. that also is a more realistic setting and gives also probably also a more realistic overview. So choice experiment are one way of measuring intention to buy, choices. Or another, of course, is preference, so liking in 7-point scale. Of course, the limitation of online study is always that it's a scenario where indeed consumers have to spontaneously tell you how much they're intending to buy, and maybe they would do it slightly different in real life when they're in the supermarket. Another option could be, for example, to run lab experiment where instead they're more realistic in one sense, but you have a small sample size. So that are all the debate in consumer research. Also, indeed, to what extent these methods are realistic. There is always a trade-off, so advantages, disadvantages of both.
In our case, when it comes to willingness to pay and willingness to buy, we measured this with two different outcomes. And based on the findings from the first results that I presented, we in fact found that consumers are not very willing to pay a lot more or anything for packaging, sustainable packaging. So findings there are somewhat discouraging, and if the majority of the consumers is not willing to pay more than for conventional in the first place, and if they are willing to pay something more, we are talking about 5 to 10%. So sustainable packaging must be made affordable and comparable to conventional plastic to have this mass acceptance of consumers, I think.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up question, Millie? You say 5 to 10% more willingness to pay. Is that willingness to pay for the package or for the packaged product?
Packaged product.
For the packaged product. So that's the carton of milk, where you pay, say, €1 for a carton of milk, then they might be willing to pay €1.05.
Yes, that's true. But we should also take in account the findings that our consumers, at least the sustainability-oriented consumers, perceived products, the same exact products packaged in sustainable packaging as tastier, healthier, more of better quality, which might in itself be, let's say, a selling factor there for these 5 to 10% increase of price.
Even though you packaged it into black package, which cannot be separated in recycling.
Yeah, this is we took the approach of most common to sustainable, and yes, the finding was a bit surprising, although we did have an initial hypothesis that black would indeed be liked most by the consumers because of this premium Q, let's say.
And Juliette, you also found indications that people thought it would be more expensive, especially the intelligent and the smart package, the intelligent and the
active packaging.
Active packaging. Yeah. So how did they respond to that idea that it would be more expensive? Was that a problem, or were they to some extent willing to cope with that, or did they see benefits or other downsides there?
I think that it could be a real problem if the product is higher, at a higher cost. But when we ask European people if they are able to buy bioplastic, active or intelligent packaging, we didn't take into account the cost issues. So they say that they are able to buy, but we don't have the notion of how they can how many money they can they can how many euro, yeah, how many money they are able to give for this kind of packaging.
Arnoud, you're muted.
Yes, I saw it. There's one other thing that was raised by Julia, in fact, and she said, well, these presentations, they bring their own unique points of understanding the consumer, but they also share some common ground in many aspects. What do you think about that? Are there things where you think, hey, that complements my own research, that actually contradicts my research? Or that could be a way forward to combine results in any way? Yeah. So just among the three of you.
Yeah, actually, indeed, I wrote that remark because especially listening the presentation of Millie in the market segmentation results, I noticed that indeed the story is quite coherent, so is reassuring in that sense. Especially, for example, the slice of the market more interested in sustainable packaging. In Millie's results were like 50%, while mine was 47.5%, really close. So we are talking about the same numbers. For example, one point of difference instead was like the market, the segment of the indifferent consumers. In the case of the survey of Millie, that are is much larger instead than compared to my results. But in general, I think indeed there is the overview, the general picture is really similar. And indeed, even if we collect data with different countries, because the country was selected are really different. So I think in general we have a homogeneous picture in Europe.
I agree. Yes, I'm not sure. I think that both Julia and Juliette talked about demographic differences in their consumers in terms of evaluations. But for us, though we did find some differences, these were not very strong. And if they were, even though if they were statistically significant, let's say. So our maybe overarching conclusion was that attitudes and behavioral measures are better or stronger predictors of consumer evaluations. But this, this is just at its beginnings when it comes to sustainable packaging and factors influencing sustainable packaging choices. So we're just paving the way, I think, now in determining which.
And maybe also another point, actually, regarding the question if these results are complementary. I think now that I'm thinking about it, I think yes, because while your results are more based on design elements of the packaging, so the compostable, the food waste, so really the design elements, my type of segmentation were more based on benefits trade-off. So indeed, I think this line of research are really complementary and actually add value to each other.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Julia, do you have anything to add to this? Because you branched out to the more intelligent and active packagings that I think both Millie and Julia did not include.
Yeah. We saw we saw that age and country have an impact regarding the perception of the European consumer, but we did not see a real impact between around the status and of the European consumer regarding all innovative packaging, so bioplastic, active, and intelligent packaging.
It's a little bit different, but it aligns to some extent with the other two studies. Then I saw a question coming in from Christophe Cotillon. Christophe, do you want to raise it yourself or should I pick it from the chat?
Good morning, everybody. So I can ask my question is, I think that sustainability, of course, is, can be the roots for sustainability can be biodegradability, compostability, but we are speaking more and more about reusable packaging. So my question was about. Do you start to make consumer studies about this concept, and what is the perception of the consumers regarding reusable packaging?
I know it was, yeah, I know it wasn't part of your studies, but have a shot at it, Millie.
Yeah, well, we didn't include a reusable packaging in our study designs simply because the products that we used were not suitable necessarily for reusable packaging, especially when it comes to minced meat. And then we are talking about probably a different material. So comparisons between materials already introduce a lot of other noise in the research. So we wanted first to focus on the differences between conventional single-use plastic and sustainable single-use plastic, simply because they share a lot of things in common with a very important distinction that we wanted to study, which is sustainability. So reusable, although my personal preference is there, but we haven't addressed it, no.
Okay. Thank you. I think in the future that probably we will have to make these studies.
Well, perhaps Juliette or Julia may want to comment on reuse.
Until now we also did not take into account reusable packaging, but in the last study, so a more recent one, instead we addressed to recycled materials in packaging. So reusable in the sense that is recycled, so as a second life. But then I know that there are indeed research also about, for example, even eatable packaging or no packaging, but where consumers reuse their own packaging. So they, for example, take their own jar. But since that, I would say, is not so commerciable, yeah, I think there is also less research in that sense.
Okay, thank you.
And Julia, do you think that these more expensive things like your intelligent and active packaging, because people see those as expensive, could those become reusable in any way?
The problem with the intelligent packaging is that we say it several times that the European consumer have really bad knowledge regarding this kind of products, and they think that this kind of product is not relevant for them. So I think that they cannot express themselves regarding reusability of intelligent packaging. However, that we can say is that the consumer put an importance regarding the reusability of sustainable packaging, as usability is the most important feature for packaging end of life regarding European consumer.
Thank you.
That's a good point. Thank you, Christophe, for this interesting topic. Are there other people who want to raise issues? Are there questions between the three of you that you want to discuss now that you know each other's work in a bit more detail? I'm putting you guys on the spot. Yeah, one of the things in these projects always is a lot of it is about buying a product, and then often implicitly you seem to be referring to a packaging. But, and I know I discussed this with Julia before, the centrality of the thing seems to turn towards packaging if I'm talking to these packaging people. But how often do you think that consumers will actively think about the package when they buy it, other than in a support role to the product they're buying?
Well, I think these numbers right now might be relatively low, but with new legislation and newer lifestyles that people are gearing towards, I think they will only become increasingly important, and getting a head start on how people see this can be pretty informative for future policy. And also, yeah, we have this 2022 plastic bag ban and so on. So I think our findings may find their way along those lines as well.
Yeah, and also maybe a way indeed to promote sustainable packaging could actually stress even more the role of the packaging for the product. So communicate this integration, this combination, because indeed for the consumer, package is what left after I open the food. So then it's empty packaging, so waste. But if instead maybe industry are also able to communicate packaging as more integral part of the food it contains, could also help to influence how consumers perceive it. So not only as a waste, but also as a fundamental part in the supply chain as well.
Yeah, I agree with Julia, and we thought that we saw in the study that more and more European are conscious of their bad impacts of their food consumption, and there is a real link between the product and the packaging, because the European consumer aims to consume better and to avoid wasted and avoid food and packaging wasted. This is the two main points that we have to highlight.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that brings actually your comments bring in two elements. So the first thing is, do consumers recognize the role of packaging in avoiding food waste? So if I'm thinking about myself, when I'm buying fresh vegetables, I tend to say, okay, I buy it, I'll eat it in 1 or 2 days. So any package is unnecessary waste. Now I've been working with the packaging people for a while, and they say, oh, wait a second, the cucumber will become very soft in a few days if you don't have that plastic wrapper. So in your opinion, do you think consumers recognize that this packaging really has a shelf life extending function?
No, in person I don't think so much, and also indeed there are other results that demonstrate that, and also in MyPack another survey where indeed, yeah, no, sorry, I'm smiling because I'm thinking about the study, but indeed where this balance between packaging waste and food waste is not really recognized by consumers. So consumers tend towards the recognition of packaging waste and environmental impact of packaging, and rather less the positive impact that the packaging can have in preventing food waste. So I think, and this also maybe actually what social media are spreading nowadays. If we see all of these events of protests against packaging, or rising of shops that indeed are no packaging shops, where you take your container and you buy the food. I think that's the evidence that consumers perceive really negative packaging, and they maybe overlook the positive potential that the packaging can have for the food waste, and also in the entire supply chain, even before consumers, so in transportation as well, so before arriving at the households of consumers.
Millie trying to talk to her muted phone.
Yes, I wanted to say that I agree with this, and I particularly like Julia's point about zero waste stores and the rise of this in the recent years. So, yeah, I think things are moving in a sustainable direction when it comes to packaging.
Yeah, and also partial.
But then again, that would link with Christophe's suggestion to look more at reusable packaging.
Yeah,
another thing that, another thing that I picked up from Millie's comment is about legislation coming up, and then we've done some position papers on social marketing, so trying to get the good things in, and to get the population to do the good things, so the sustainable things. You have a number of levers you can use, and that can be policy or legislations, just putting more taxes or making it even illegal to do something unsustainable. But then you force the population. You can train them through education, and of course then you would need to go at early ages at elementary schools. And then you have the marketing, where you try to make the sustainable choice, the nice choice, the choice with the high benefit for the end user. And of course, if you want to present something, you may work with a balance. And how do you guys have any ideas about this balance of these three elements, where the product marketing, which I think most of your work has been about, has a role, and what role would that be in your view?
Yeah, I think indeed that taxation alone is not enough, but it's not only in sustainable packaging, it's also seen in different realities. And indeed, I think that the three pillars, so education, marketing, and legislation should, of course, go together. So you can increase taxes, but you should also communicate properly and educate consumers, so that it becomes like a feeling that comes from inside, and not only, indeed, as you said, like forcing consumers, because especially this legislation can maybe have an effect in the short term, but a lot of studies also demonstrate that the effect in the long term is quite limited. So, and not only in sustainable packaging, but many other topics. And indeed, I think that even if we all know that consumers can be educated, and we as consumers should be educated even more. Also, actually, one of my results in my previous study, the first study of MyPack, where I did interviews with packaging experts, a lot of these results that came out were that packaging industries are still feeling that consumers are not intelligent beings, and therefore they don't want to engage in complex communication with them. That was actually one of the main results of these focus group interviews that I had with packaging experts, where the packaging, they admit themselves, the packaging sector is also a field where, still probably more communication and education is necessary with consumers, and maybe even more consumer-oriented approaches are necessary.
Do Juliette or Millie want to respond to that, or add some of their own views?
I completely agree with Julia, and I think that the education of European consumer is one of the main issue main challenge to take into account, and we note that European consumer need to have to get more information, and this could be a key of success to to take up the markets with this kind of packaging and products and sustainability products.
Billy, if you have nothing to add and you keep silent, I think then a lot has been said. If there are no urgent questions anymore, and I haven't seen a few in the chat, then we can round this up with the conclusion that it's not only a marketing thing, the consumers, but it's embedded in a much larger policy effort where legislation, the petroleum issue, but perhaps also education, some more campaigns. So actually to get the consumers on board, it's going to be a huge effort that has to be played on multiple fronts, I would say. Leaving it to the market alone is probably not going to fly, but a concerted action of policymakers, communicators, marketeers, product developers may actually be promising. And I think that shows the complexity and the richness of how the consumer is seen in the current way of looking at it. That brings us to the end of 2 hours of talking about consumers in this webinar. I'm not sure whether Noel, as organizer, wants to say a few closing words, but in any case, I would really like to give a big hand for all the presenters. So
thank you.
I hope you all agree.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for these introductions and this challenging discussion we had last half an hour. And for me, that's it. I wish you a very nice day, and hope to hear more from you.
Yeah, thank you for moderating.
Yeah, thank you, Hold, and have a nice day.
Yes, thank you, Arnaud. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for the good moderation.